Hey, Hickok here again. I'm sporting, as you might notice, a big revolver on my hip. Okay, happens to be a 357 Magnum, Model 19, Smith & Wesson. Okay, it's in a paddle type holster made by O'Rourke. Okay, I'm bad about not giving you the kind of holster I'm wearing, and I get lots of questions about it. This is a O'Rourke. Yeah, it's an O'Rourke. Yeah, I think that's his name. I've bought several holsters from him. He sets up at gun shows around here in the Tennessee area. I think he's from Alabama or Georgia, and good guy. Makes these holsters, and as far as I can tell, they're as good as Galco or any others, maybe for $10 less, that sort of thing. But he makes a nice paddle holster, and he makes a lot of other ones too. So that's an O'Rourke holster. 357 Magnum, Model 19. I'm going to give you a close-up of this baby. This is a 4-inch Model 19. Some of you, if you're younger, you might not know what that is. That may not mean much to you. But if in the 70s someone had mentioned a Model 19, it would have been as common as saying a Glock 19. And I'm serious about that. Model 19 was kind of one of the standards. If somebody wanted a revolver, their first gun perhaps, that's what would leap to mind. Well, how can you beat a Model 19? It's an average size frame in the Smith & Wesson line, kind of like the Glock 19, right? Average size gun, you can't go wrong with. Might not be the ultimate or your very, very favorite, but you can't go wrong with it. Hardly anybody could. Well, in a 357 Magnum revolver that would also fire 38 special ammunition in a mid-size frame, how could you go wrong with it? Right? In fact, when I got out of college, my very first gun that I purchased was a Model 19, just like this, except it had a 6-inch barrel. You know, it was back in my longer barrel days when I preferred longer barrels on my revolvers. But 4 inches is to me the ideal length, and then kind of a target gun like this. Right? Model 19 Smith & Wesson. This is an older one. It, you know, you don't go buy blued Smith & Wessons very much anymore, do you? This one harkens back to the, I think probably the late 70s. It doesn't have the pinned and recessed barrel, but it, other than that, it's just like the early 70s and the 60s models. You know, it's got the frame, or the hammer-mounted firing pin and all that. And for you Smith aficionados, I'll give you a close-up there. You can tell from the cylinder latch and from everything else, it's an older Smith & Wesson. The old grips, the old combat grips. This was also referred to as the Combat Magnum, I think, before they even designated it as the Model 19. So, nice gun, you couldn't go wrong with. This was the gun in the 4-inch configuration that would have very likely been on the state trooper's hip if they stopped you for speeding back in the 70s. You know, 4-inch 357 Magnum. You know, for a long time this was the standard. This is what you would see right there on the big state trooper's hip, and you have the big grips on it too. Okay. Model 19 Smith. Great gun. I was fortunate. I traded a little Smith & Wesson to a fella here in Nashville, with the proprietor, in fact, of a East Side gun shop, good fella. I traded him a very short 2-inch barreled Smith that he really liked for this. He had, as I understand, he had sent this back to Smith & Wesson. If you notice, it has a really beautiful blue job on it. Okay, the bluing's just gorgeous. It looks like it's right off the factory line here. Okay, it essentially is. He sent it back and had them to re-blue it, and so it has a factory re-blue job on it. But it is a used gun, and it's, you know, it's in great shape, but it hadn't been shot out. But it's just like a new one. So I was glad to get that. I'd been thinking about it for a long time because it was my very first gun. I let it get away, as we often do, and in some kind of trade for something else I just had to have. And it's kind of nice to have a Model 19 357 Magnum back in the stable again. So I thought I would kind of premiere and feature this gun a little bit. Many of you, if you're over 40, 50 certainly, you remember these guns very, very well, and you might have one. And they're kind of a premium now. They're not easy to find. If you find one, they look like they've been beat up, run over by a truck or something. I don't know what the deal is. They're just difficult to find at gun shows or anywhere. So I was glad to find this old one. 357 Magnum. I've shot some 357s out here before. This is kind of a special gun. It's kind of a classic because it was carried by so many policemen for so long. You know, the revolver, the double action Smith & Wesson revolver, as well as the Colt, but more so I think the Smith was kind of like the Glock is today in terms of police holsters. If you could go back in time into the 50s and 60s and 70s and part of the 80s and look in police holsters, you're very likely to find a gun just like this, 357 mid-size frame. This is the K frame. If you recall my other video, if you've seen it, the one I did on the 642 Smith & Wesson, I also included in that video a little bit on my Model 65 bobbed hammer. I had ground the hammer off of that one, if you recall that. Well, that's the same frame, essentially the same gun, except this one has adjustable sights, and that one is stainless. You know, so they're the same frame size, same caliber. That one has a round butt. The older Smiths, they didn't have the round butt. Just to give you a little information here you may not want, but you notice the frame on these is a square. I can't put those small grips on this gun even if I wanted to, and I really don't. I want to keep this one kind of in the classic format there, configuration. But the old ones, you couldn't put those little boot grips and things on them because they had a bigger frame. Now all the Smiths have the round butt, as they call it. I don't think they even make this square frame anymore. So, good old Smith. Thought we might run it through its paces here a little bit. Again, one of the advantages of a 357 Magnum, if you're kind of a revolver person or you'd like to start out with a revolver, everybody doesn't need an automatic, a SIG, a Glock, a M&P, or a Springfield polymer gun. Everybody doesn't need one of those. You might be more comfortable with a revolver, and you might just enjoy going to the range where you got full control over just everything, you know, a simpler kind of a gun. Gun like this would be fun to shoot. You can shoot the really hot 357 Magnum rounds in it, or you can shoot 38 special rounds, which are much easier on the hand for target shooting. And a lot of people actually even carry a 350 or carry a 38 special plus P, a defensive round in their 357s. You know, something that's pretty warm but not quite really hot 357 energy-wise. So let's take a few shots. I've got my standard load here. It's not too excessive. It's actually a 165 grain bullet of all things, and that's partly because it's a round nose. That's partly because I just ended up with a bunch of these many years ago, and so I'm loading them up and shooting them. They're 38 caliber, and they're 357 Magnum cases. They're a light Magnum. They're not excessively hot. They're just fun to shoot. So let's take a few shots. I'll back up here a little bit where maybe you can a little closer look. You know what? It would be a really good idea if I put my ears in, wouldn't it? There we go. I had those empty paint cans up there. They always make good targets. This gun, and with those loads, I can fire those double action without too much trouble because they're not too hot. For target shooting, just playing around, I highly recommend a moderate load, something that you'll enjoy shooting. Reload, you know, I went through some of that on my other video, so I won't go through the speed loader business with this one. But a revolver, again, is pretty quick to operate. You know, you just dump them out. If you got a speed loader, you put 6 in, you back up, you're ready to go again. Now, I didn't bring the speed loaders out today and play with all that, but nice. Now, this is a 4-inch barrel, and in some ways, for me, that's a pretty long barrel. I'm kind of known for even shorter barrels than that, but definitely long enough. Let's go on over to the hillside a little bit. Well, let's start out at the 80-yard gong. We've got to put one on him before we do anything else, don't we? Poor little piggy. Click. Well, I was shooting at that turkey, but I was going a little bit high. So let's take him. Turkey has to fall now. Becomes the principle of the thing. So you see the turkey I'm talking about, he's standing just to the right of the ram. So he is going over. If I have to run over there and kick him. All right, well, knock him sideways. Let's try his buddy. Yep, knock him sideways. Well, they're not going to fall. All right. I get to fooling around out here, and of course I don't always hit everything. And if I get to missing, I've got to bear down and concentrate and focus to do my best shooting, right? Now let me also show you, I've got some 38 specials. Fire a few of those. They're also around those bullets, same weight. Well, no, actually they're not. Those Magnum rounds I'm firing though are kind of an aberration. You know, no one offers a 165 grain 357 bullet that I know of. Those were originally designed for the 38 Super. But I'm going to shoot these 158 grain, which is the standard 38 special. Now they're very light. There's 4 of them in there. Very light. Okay. Now you notice I was firing that double action. Those are really light loads, very comfortable to load. Anybody, a fairly young child, would not be intimidated by those rounds. And that was always the beauty of a 357 Magnum revolver. You could buy some 38s and put those in there, and just anybody that hasn't had any experience shooting or very little would not be intimidated. The recoil wouldn't be so heavy that they wouldn't want to pick up that gun again, even if all they'd ever shot was a 22. So that's a nice thing about it. Now I've got some others I load here. These are jacketed 357. These are 158 grain bullets. These are more standard. They're not really any hotter than those originals. I just don't have a lot of use for firing or loading up extremely hot 357 rounds. If I want something that's definitely going to knock over everything over there, I'll get my 44 out with some healthy rounds, or 10 millimeter with some healthy rounds. But for 38s, 357, I load them down to where it's very moderate, just fun to shoot generally. Nice gun, fun to shoot. Let me put a few more in. And as I pointed out before, you're not unarmed with a revolver. The old things will crank them right out. You saw I popped a couple of times over there to 80 yards, and then even up close and dirty. If you want to. Well, actually, I think I threw a couple off. But this is a nice revolver, really, really sweet. The old Model 19, and some of you probably have one. Like me, you might have started out with it and have fond memories of the old Model 19. But it's this Smith & Wesson. It's not a Glock, is it? The Model 19. Kind of ironic or coincidental that two of the most practical, useful, universal guns that have been around in the last, 60 years, both were designated Model 19s, one the Smith & Wesson and one the Glock. So, the old Model 19, great gun. Sorry you missed that generation if you're young. If you are 25 years old, you've never even owned a revolver, Hopefully my videos will maybe give you a little more appreciation for some of the revolvers, and maybe you'll pick one up sometime. There's so many shooters that I encounter that work on nothing but building up their speed with a Glock or with a Springfield or an M&P or whatever they're shooting a lot of, and they're burning hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rounds trying to get better with them and shoot them faster and all this kind of thing, that they may never even shoot in competition. And even if they do, yeah, so what? There's so many great guns to enjoy in the shooting sports. Hopefully you at least branch out. You may not go grab a flintlock like I've done, and some weird things like that, or old Colt single actions, but at least think about a revolver. They're just a lot of fun to shoot. And I'll sign off for now and talk to you later.